Afternoon, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world. Hello, my name is Kyle Mox. I am Associate Dean for National Scholarships at Arizona State University, and I am the Director of the Office of National Scholarships Advisement. And today we're going to be talking about prestigious UK fellowships, just a general introduction to awards in this category. And joining me today are two previous ASU winners. Erin Schulte will be joining us when she's available. She let me know just beforehand she had a work emergency. Point teachable moment there. Don't ever invite anyone to one of your events that has way too much time and availability, right? They're probably not the person you want. But Nathaniel Ross, our most recent Rhodes Scholar, was able to join us. Nathaniel, you want to say hello and just kind of offer a brief introduction about what you did at ASU and what you're doing now?
Yeah, sure thing. Hi, everyone. I'm Nathaniel. I graduated from ASU twice now, actually. So in 2022 and 2023. And I was really involved in research and all sorts of things, but also did a lot of external work and public policy throughout the US and abroad. Now I am finishing my second year up at Oxford on the Rhodes Scholarship, doing an MPhil in comparative social policy. I study and research welfare and poverty in the US compared to other high-income countries. And I am planning to go to law school after my time on the road. So I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have and yeah, good to get on to it.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, and as we're moving through, if there's any questions that come to mind, feel free to pop them in the chat. If it's something I know we'll address, I'll just save it and we'll come back to it later. We'll have time for Q&A at the end as well. So if you're thinking of questions along the way that are a little bit more abstract, that might be the time. But yeah, generally the assumption is here that, you'll have a general understanding of these awards and, that they can support graduate study in the UK, but we're going to get a little deeper into what the difference between these particular awards are. In terms of national scholarships, just if you're not familiar with the N and the S in ONSA, these are major awards that are offered by entities outside of ASU. So none of these awards is specific to ASU. And so that would mean that we have very large applicant pools because they're being offered nationally or internationally. But our office is here to help you compete and apply for these awards, right? And so because they're so large, because the selection rates are so small, they're therefore quite prestigious. And so the odds of getting one of these awards is small, but the payoff is quite big. And so it's important to keep in mind, right? That with big rewards also comes big expectations. In terms of how we're involved in this, we provide end-to-end support to applicants for all of these major awards. And so things like we're doing now, just making sure that ASU students are well informed on opportunities. But once you get into the process, the majority of our time is spent, providing individual advising to students. And so we'll be working with you throughout the process to help draft, ideate, brainstorm, revise, edit, prep for interviews, all these sorts of things. We also manage the campus nomination process. So for many of these awards, as we'll learn in a moment, you must first be nominated in order to apply. And so we manage that process on behalf of the university. I organize the faculty committee and sort of facilitate that process. Put away your Venmo. I don't influence the choices. I'm there as basically a facilitator for the faculty as much as I am for you. But essentially working with faculty to write better letters of recommendation for you and to find great students and all these sorts of things. So really just making sure that every student at ASU who would be a great candidate for these awards gets the best possible support if they choose to apply. So today we're going to focus in on just five major awards, and the Rhodes, Marshall, and Gates Cambridge, Churchill, and the Fulbright program, which is a little bit of an outlier, but and also note, I'm not using any Getty images here. Everything that we're looking at along the way are pictures of actual ASU students who have won these major awards. So if that doesn't motivate you to know that you'll appear someday in a PowerPoint presentation, I don't know what will. So, all right, let's talk about the reality, right? And let's just get that out of the way right now. I often refer to the Rhodes Scholarships when people ask me what I do for a living, because that's the one many people are aware of outside of the university, right? It makes the news when people win it. They remember Bill Clinton was a Rhodes Scholar, things like that. In the most recent application cycle, or one of the most recent application cycles, about 250 universities and colleges nominated students for this award, right? So if you consider that there's 2,200 educational institutions nationwide, just a small number of those actually nominated students. Many of them nominated multiple students, including ASU, if not a couple dozen students. Ultimately, 862 applicants endorsed, so that's the nominated students. It's usually between 800 and 900, 850 to 950 students nationwide. They are distributed among 16 different election districts, and each district selects two. And if you also figure there's about 12 to 15 finalists per district, you can see, that funnel doesn't get a whole lot wider as we move down it. So your overall odds of success, just statistically speaking, of winning a Rhodes Scholarship is less than 4%. So your odds are actually better of getting admitted to Harvard or Stanford than it would be to win a Rhodes Scholarship, right? So, and I know that's kind of intimidating. When we look, yeah, Marshall's usually around the same. Churchill's a little better because it's more niche. Gates is a global applicant pool, so it's very tight. And the selection rate for Fulbright varies. We'll explain why that is in a moment. It just depends on what you choose. So that being the case, one might wonder, okay, why am I even here? Maybe I should log off and go eat a sandwich or something. So Nathaniel, thinking back when you're at this stage of the game yourself, what was your thinking or thought process when, I'm always very honest with applicants. We look at the statistics up front. What was your thought process? How did you process through that?
Yeah, it's obviously very intimidating when you kind of are faced with just the volume of people. And I know even like being at the interviews, you get to kind of see and meet all the people that you're going up against, and they're all very accomplished and impressive, and any one of them could also like win the award. And so I think just through the process, you also gain a lot. So if you don't win the award, you meet a lot of people through the process if you go to like a finalist weekend for any of these awards, right? So I've been to several finalist weekends for different scholarships. Some I won and some I didn't, but all of them I've met friends that have met great connections that I still talk to today at years after the fact. And then just for the actual application process, many of you guys want to go to graduate school. That's why you're applying to a graduate school program, a fellowship that would fund it. So getting to understand why you want to go to a program, why your reasons for pursuing graduate education, and actually crystallizing those thoughts will be really helpful for your other applications as well. So maybe you're planning to apply for Marshall, but you're also going to apply for PhDs in the US. Being able to kind of understand why you're doing that and be able to write those things out is such a valuable thing to learn about yourself. And so you gain a lot just from the actual process, but besides even winning the award. So, because I've done this many times with different awards and I've not won all of them, that's for sure. And I can tell you that I've gained so much just from the process.
Absolutely. And that's an excellent turning point because we want to talk about reasons not to do this and reasons to do this. If you're just looking for money for grad school, there are far, far easier ways to go about this, right? Especially if you're going to go, if you would just want to study in the US, there are, education is expensive. I get it. But, most of the universities do have their own financial aid resources. Merit funding generally comes from inside departments. Definitely something you should think about, right? So if you're just looking for money, statistically speaking, looking at the amount of time you're going to spend on this versus the odds of success, I would really just, put that time into doing your homework. I don't know what else to do after graduation, right? Which is not a persuasive argument. If you're asking somebody to give you $100,000, right? Well, why do you want this? I'm not sure, right? That's not going to get you anywhere. If you think that, be selected as a Rhodes or Marshall Scholar will just look nice on your resume and help you get a nice consulting job and this, that, you're right. But as a motivation, that's going to run out of gas pretty quickly. The selectors are very good at seeing through superficial reasons or more mercenary reasons for wanting to win these awards. It's very rare that students make it through with those kinds of reasons. For people that are thinking about med school or law school or things like that, if they're just looking for a gap year, like something to kill time until they get on with the rest of their life, again, there are far easier ways to go about this. And also, we need to have good, strong, solid, clear motivations that are important to people besides you when we are applying. And so everything that, Nathaniel was talking about in terms of thinking through our motives and explaining why we want to do this and how this all snaps together. The fact that you have a relative in England, not persuasive, right? 99% of Americans have a relative who originated from another country. That's kind of the premise, right? But I've had people say, oh yeah, I think, I'll have an advantage because my aunt lives in London. I'm like, Why would they care about that, right? And people are like, oh, I'll just want to see. Like, there are a lot of scholarships out there where, yeah, you basically just fill out the form and throw it in and maybe you get lucky. These are not those, right? And so if you want to see, yes, we'll support that, but you also have to be willing to do the work. Because as Nathaniel pointed out, the process is the outcome. The value that you really get out of this comes through the process of applying for this because that's knowledge, skills, and abilities that you can easily transfer to other activities. So you have a clear sense of what you're trying to accomplish. You have a personal vision that makes you a better leader. Better leaders, stand up and say, "This is what I think we should do." And I think in some, you become a better person, right? And I know it's not polite to say that when people say, "Well, do you think you're better than me?" I'm like, "Well, I know that I'm trying harder than you are. At least you can say that, right?" And we know this. If you don't apply, your odds of success are exactly zero. And so zero is infinitely worse than anything more than zero. We know that. So, um, and we collect reflections from all of our applicants after the fact, and they say, yeah, now I've got letters of recommendation put away. I've got material for my future graduate school applications. Everything I do, I'll become more competitive for other things. And I know, working with Nathaniel didn't stop when he got the Rhodes Scholarship. We're still working on other applications and talking through things. I will say he needs less and less support and input from me as time goes on, right? Because you've gotten good at this, right? You've gotten good at applying for things and reshaping your narrative and things like that. And so ultimately, that's what we want is for you to be able to build that professional skill set, which is going to become increasingly important in a more uncertain world. Whether or not I win the scholarship, I feel I've grown a lot through the process, right? And that's what we depend on as a growth mindset here, that we are going into this with the idea that we're going to continuously improve through the process. This is not a perfectible thing. We're going to aim at perfect and land in good enough, and that's fine. And we'll get up tomorrow and we'll do it again. Um, you know, Other applicants said I was able to prove to myself that I have accomplished some great things and have potential to accomplish even more. One of the things I would encourage you to do throughout this process and early in the process is to go to the Rhodes or Marshall or Gates website and take a look at the biographies of some of the recent winners. And before you do that, sit down in a comfy chair, steel yourself, right? These biographies are going to be really intimidating. They're going to be really impressive. But I also want you to remember yourself that in a year or two hence, when somebody else is reading your 100-word bio, they're going to say, wow, this person's really impressive, right? We live our own lives. They're fairly boring. They're normal to us. But when we sit down and really look at it, I have done some great things. And I think that's important to do from time to time. And ultimately, we're just trying to teach you skills for reflection and being able to put all those pieces together into something. And we do win, right? We have had 3 Rhodes Scholars winners in the past 10 years, Nathaniel being our most recent. Ngoni Maguisi, who is one of our other recent Rhodes winners. 5 Marshall Scholars, 6 Gates Cambridge Scholars, and I know these numbers don't mean a whole lot, but for a large public university, these are actually pretty remarkable numbers. I will also be frank. The majority of Rhodes scholarships, well, maybe just under the majority, maybe like, let's say 47%, go to 4 schools. They go to students from Harvard, Princeton, and Yale. Maybe Stanford. Let's throw Stanford in there and make it even 50%, right? And so the rest of the United States is really scrambling over the other 16 scholarships. And for a large public university who, maybe doesn't get the same sort of view from the readers, or maybe, these students have had access to incredible opportunities, you know, it's amazing that you have come to a school that says yes to almost everyone who says, I'd like to go to ASU. Can I please come? Absolutely, come in and do the work. And that we can get you to the same place as someone that says no to 97% of the people, right? I think that's a testament. And we're also the second highest producing public university for Fulbrights, which is great. So Nathaniel, you met. In that same year, we also had a Marshall Scholar. So we are one of only 3 public universities to have both a Rhodes and Marshall Scholar in that year. And Katie is actually at Oxford now as well. We'll talk more about this, but she did her first year at another university and a second year at Oxford. Her primary area of interest is WASH, or water, sanitation, and hygiene. I know the acronym doesn't exactly work, but yeah, she's working on from an engineering background, really thinking about access to clean water, particularly for women in the developing world. So she couldn't attend today because I think she's in Spain doing a field trip or research or something. So, all right, at this point, we've scared you a lot. And that's kind of the point, right? It looks like almost everyone has stayed on. That's good. So we're doing something right. So the question I inevitably get is, what do you think my chances are? Do you think I'm competitive? Should I do this? And that's an impossible question to ask to some degree. I can look at somebody's resume and transcripts and say, you know what? I don't think this is a good fit for you because I know what goes in the application. I know what's laying ahead of you, and I know whether or not you've got, content to work with there. But beyond that, once we see, yeah, generally, I think this makes sense for you to apply. Beyond that, it really comes into how you execute, right? And so, your academic background and how well that fits, your service record, leadership, whether you have clarity of purpose, what it is that you're trying to accomplish, and just sort of the general potential impact that you present, right? Can you influence the world in a positive direction? I tend to think about these as accelerators, meaning anyone who is a feasible candidate for Rhodes, Marshall, Gates, anything like this, is probably going to do okay in life, right? You're going to end up doing a lot of great things if you're a feasible candidate. These experiences, though, can accelerate that process. They can put you into a different network. They can put you in contact with world-class faculty and research opportunities, and it could expedite that process a little bit, maybe open up some doors that would not have been there. So, Nathaniel, you've been around a lot of scholars like this, and you were at the back end of it yourself, and a lot of your even friends and colleagues at ASU were trying similar things. What's your take on it? If you're at this end of things, the beginning end of things, how does someone start to assess whether or not you're competitive for, some of these really big awards? What are the qualities that you've kind of noticed?
I'd say the primary thing, because I get people reaching out to me a lot, and asking me this question, like, am I am I competitive? Should I bother? It was like, well, one, like you said earlier, you are a 0% acceptance rate if you don't apply, sort of thing. But the kind of clearest indicator for me is whether you have a, very defined sense of purpose of what you're trying to do, right? So, you don't have to have all the answers. We're all young. We all have lots of, things in our future that might be uncertain, but you need to have some sort of guiding light that is informing the things that you do, the experiences that you have. And I've found that the people who are most successful in these programs all have a guiding light, and it's all very different, right? So that's a very general idea of what is something that you're really passionate about, and how does that manifest in your work, in your background, in your experiences, and then your future goals as well. If you have some sort of really strong connecting idea through all of that, I think you can be competitive for one of these awards. And that's like the easiest way to kind of determine, like, do you have a bit of a sense of clarity on what you're hoping to do, and how that connects to what you have done? That's a really good metric.
Hmm. Yeah, I would agree. I've worked with many applicants who have really impressive resumes, really impressive transcripts, but there's lacking that connection between the different dots on that resume. They're not entirely sure why they did this or that or how it all connects, right? In terms of academics, generally speaking, everyone who's here falls within the category of, from a quantitative standpoint, being strong enough. I didn't blast out to the entire Barrett or ASU community, right? I was thoughtful in terms of whom I reached out to because I don't want to waste anyone's time. But the GPA matters in context. One context to consider is that ASU awards A plus grades, which changes our grading scale to a 4.3. When we're looking at 3.7 and up, keep in mind that everyone else is working at a 4.0 scale, so we have to kind of modify that. If you've got C grades or things like that, that normally are offset by that plus, think, okay, what does my GPA actually look like without that? And more importantly, what are those grades in? Are they in my major courses? Are they in kind of blow off courses? Are they in courses that are fundamental to my graduate study? Do my grades go up and down, or they kind of steadily climb, or have they just held steady? And more importantly, what are the classes I am taking? Have I challenged myself with the most challenging curriculum? Um, Appropriate curriculum, and by that I mean a lot of times I'll work with candidates who come to me and say, okay, yeah, I want to take the BA in philosophy at Oxford. And then I look at their transcripts and I see like 6 credit hours of philosophy. I'm like, you're aware that this is the considered by many to be the most difficult and challenging philosophy program in the world, and you have two philosophy classes. Like, oh yeah, but I've always wanted to do it. I'm like, now is not the time to change horses, right? There are many other ways to do that. There's a lot of different programs in the UK that can serve that purpose. But just because you are passionate about a topic and have not actually done the coursework to prepare yourself for it, that's not going to work. So we can talk through that. Intellect in action is a term I use to mean, what are you doing with all of this knowledge, right? Are you writing policy? Are you getting involved? Are you publishing? Are you getting your voice heard? Are you writing op-ed pieces? All of that knowledge is useless unless we actually activate it for something. Service and leadership is I think, what really sets these apart from just general graduate funding, right? All of these programs are mission driven, meaning that they have a specific objective and they're looking for applicants who can help them meet those objectives. And one of the things they often look for is this a service-oriented person who demonstrates leadership characteristics? Now, what leadership characteristics are varies depending on your personal context, right? Somebody who is a chemical engineering major versus somebody who's a public policy major, that's going to look very different. But, you should be able to articulate, the outcomes of your work. And when I ask people, okay, if that's your leadership example, who was following you? And that's where the conversation tends to drop off quite a bit, because a lot of times undergraduates will classify anything that they did as extra or anything that they did a lot of work towards counts as leadership, as opposed to an incident where you actually use your interpersonal skills to identify resources, motivate people towards a goal, articulate a vision, get people to buy in. That's a lot harder than just doing all the extra work, right? So and these leadership action, the service activity should be intentional. There's obviously a narrative here, and the CV should tell a narrative, right? Meaning, as Nathaniel was just mentioning a little bit ago, you're following a guiding light, even if you're not entirely sure where it's leading you, but there's some intentionality between, the choices that you've made. So, Aaron, I just saw you pop in. Are you online now?
I am. Hello, everyone. So sorry to be late.
Wonderful. Yeah, we're just getting in sort of the general discussion at this point. But we did some general introductions earlier. You want to do a quick introduction? Tell us, what award you won, what you did at ASU, and what you're doing now.
Absolutely. And I will just say I apologize.
No
We
worries.
are in the midst of a bit of a work emergency right now, so it is fully possible that someone will come into this room and I will get pulled away. And I apologize in advance if that happens. I really hope it doesn't. But yeah, my name is Erin Schulte. I was a 2017 graduate. I majored in global studies and economics as a minor. Um, and I was awarded a Marshall Scholarship. I spent 2 years in the United Kingdom. My first year was in King's College London, studying political economy of emerging markets. Second year was at Oxford, studying social science of the internet. And I will just say, you guys are in great hands with Dr. Mox. Has been incredible. I worked with him, on various scholarship applications over at least 3 years, and he never steered me wrong. So, very much, you guys are in great hands. And thank you, Dr. Mox, for including me today.
Yeah. So what are you doing now? What's the potential work emergence so people get a sense of where you ended up with those degrees?
So I spent time initially, let's see, right out of grad school, I went to Senator Sinema's office, her personal office. Then I went over to her subcommittee on the Homeland Security Governmental Affairs Committee. Then I went to the White House, the National Security Council. And now I am back in the Senate working for a Michigan senator. Unfortunately, I can't go into more detail right now about
No,
what the work emergency is, but
no, no, no.
but yeah, very happy to be here though.
Fair enough. So you've heard this theme pop up several times. This idea of unity of purpose. You got to have a cause. This has to be an issue of public concern, and you want to cast yourself in such a way that your success aligns with our success, meaning the readers, the rest of the world, the people in your community. Like, we want to buy in to what you're doing because you will make the world a better place. Anyone with any degree of imagination can make this work, right? And so even if you're like somebody, well, I'm a STEM major, I research protein cell structures. How does that matter? I'm like, well, I think it does matter, right? There's a reason why we're doing this research. There's a reason why we fund this research because it is going to improve our lives, as opposed to somebody who works directly in governmental service and is a little more obvious. This can be a tougher sell, honestly, for people in, say, business majors. In 25 years of doing this work, I've never had a business major advance in the programs because it's a little more difficult to say how your desire to work in the private sector and generate profit is going to make the world a better place. And so there is a little bit of bias in these selection, not to say that we couldn't make this happen, and we have some sub majors and some specialties at ASU I think could make that happen. But if you're like, yeah, I want to go into consulting and I want to work in, private equity and, well, great, go do that, right? But, that doesn't align with the mission of these programs. And so again, connecting those dots all towards a larger purpose. So we're going to get details about the awards a little bit, get some more insight from our guests and have plenty of time for Q&A. So I just want to cover briefly so we all understand what the difference is between these awards, which have kind of similar purposes, right? The Rhodes Scholarship was the oldest of these types of fellowships, and it actually, I think, is the oldest international fellowship that there is. Most awards are kind of based on this model in some kind of way, where we have a written application and interviews and things like that. One of the interesting things about Rhodes is that it's not just for graduate study. You can also use it to get a second bachelor's degree. And one might wonder why you would do that. Well, like the case I mentioned before, where maybe you're pivoting a little bit and maybe you are environmental studies major who wants to pick up some policy proficiency, then something like the PPE at Oxford would be a great option for that. Not as common as it once was, back in the 60s and 70s. In the early days, it was a bit more common, but it's certainly an option. Nathaniel, I don't know if you know anyone in Rhodes cohorts around you that are doing the second BA option.
I don't think so, mostly because the reason people kind of did more BAs was because Oxford didn't really offer master's degrees before.
Right.
And then now, if you want to do, you can really do a 3-year DPhil in the UK,
Yep.
which would be the same amount of times it takes to do another bachelor's. So I don't know if I know anyone doing the BA.
Yeah. So it is possible, but certainly not as common as it once was. As I mentioned, there's only 32 American Rhodes Scholars selected per year. There's 100 Rhodes Scholars selected each year. And so the other 68 are coming from the other constituencies. So that's the one important difference, is that the Rhodes is a global program, meaning that it is really focused on a global cohort, the largest part of which is the American constituency. But again, you'll be there with Rhodes Scholars from Germany and China and UAE and Zimbabwe and all various parts of the world. So, Nathaniel, what's that experience been like? A lot of times we picture our own experience here. How does that purpose change the experience of being a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford?
I mean, I think it's very similar just to being at Oxford itself, because Oxford is, especially in the graduate programs, is very international. You're also put into an individual college at Oxford, so you're in a smaller group within the university, and those tend to also be very like geographically diverse. I think it's cool because you get to have a lot of perspective from people who've had, their experiences completely in a different country that you've never been to, and being able to kind of share their experiences of viewing what the United States is doing and being able to kind of share how it relates to what is going on in their own country. I think that kind of adds to the fact that everyone's doing different subjects. So not only do you get perspectives on someone doing chemistry and someone doing English literature, but you also get that perspective of someone who's from Spain, but also from India. And so it's really pretty valuable to have all of that working together.
Yeah. So obviously, citizenship requirements vary by country, and they're not quite the same for all countries. In some cases, you can have, like, say, India, for instance, you can have Indian citizenship, but you need to have gone to school in India, as opposed to, like in Ngoni's case, he's Zimbabwean, but attended university in the U.S., and so he was able to apply through the Zimbabwean constituency. It just varies, right? And so if you're applying in the American cohort, which has its own set of rules and its own deadline, obviously U.S. citizenship is required, and there are some asterisks on that as well because they view residency a little bit differently. Minimum GPA 3.7 and up. They didn't used to have a hard cutoff, but I think just in practice they realized that wasn't doing anyone any favors, right? Again, very large pool. of a lot of very accomplished students, each of whom their universities think is great. It's difficult to reach past all of the 4.0 students who have equally impressive resumes to pick a student with a less than perfect academic record. And not that they're a lesser person, it's just, they're trying to make very difficult decisions. The one limiter for Rhodes is that you must be between ages 18 and 24 at the time of application. That was Cecil Rhodes's intention, was that we get together young leaders from around the world to have this common intellectual experience. And so, yeah, as long as you're under age 24 at the time of application, at least for the American constituency, you're able to apply. And you must be, of course, a good candidate for the program at Oxford. If you're curious about the different constituencies, as you can see, there's all over. And now there's even a global one. There's 2 awards for anything that doesn't fit in any of the categories. And Rhodes has really been proactive in casting itself as a global fellowship in recent years. And so I think that's wonderful. And ASU, being a global university itself, we've enjoyed great success by having students from many different countries able to apply. The application itself is alarmingly straightforward. You would think for something this big, it would be a large, elaborate application. But really, no, it's a 2-page resume, a 1,000-word personal statement, and then a 500-word description of your academic program. Here's the tricky bit: 5 to 8 letters of recommendation. There are no other awards that require as many letters of recommendation as Rhodes, and I think it's what really distinguishes it from others. 4 of those need to be academic references, so meaning coming from faculty members who have taught you or supervised your research. And of course, you need to be endorsed by ASU. The personal statement prompt has changed recently, and I think it's different than even since Nathaniel applied. And that's important to note for a couple of reasons. First off, Rhodes has another unique feature in that they forbid you from getting feedback on your personal statement. They say that's not allowed. You actually sign a little affidavit at the end that says, no, I didn't get any help on this at all. I could spend a next hour debating why that's not a great idea, but it's their money and they can do what they want. And ultimately, I agree with their purpose, which is that so many people are desperate to win a Rhodes Scholarship. They're all kind of colluding on advice and getting advice from the internet and all these other things. And what was happening is they were getting 800 of pretty much the same essay. And they were tired of that. And they wanted students to be writing in their own voice, telling their own story, which I would like to think is what, I've been helping students do all along, but, we can talk about that later. That rule was in place when you applied, right, Nathaniel? I can't remember.
Yeah, the rule's been in place for a while now. It's quite
Yeah.
a source of contention amongst scholars. In fact.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we can debate this all the time. As somebody comes from a writing instruction background, I've got real issues with this, but nonetheless, here we are. We'll talk about why this isn't such a big problem in a moment, right? For letters of recommendation, again, I think that's kind of what distinguishes the old joke is that Rhodes scholars become senators and Marshall scholars become professors. And I don't know how accurate that is, but I think if you think about somebody who's able to get 8 strong letters of recommendation, they've been very active in a number of different circles. Whereas the Marshall Scholarship allows you to focus your intentions a bit more, and we'll talk about that. And so maybe that's how that came out of play. I haven't done the homework to see if that's true or not, but yeah, and so we'll unpack that a bit. In terms of criteria, these criteria have been in place since 1902. Literary and scholastic attainments, and that's not just your transcripts, but also your CV in terms of publication, research opportunities, awards, honors, things like that. Energy to use one's talents to the full, and this used to say, as exemplified by a fondness for and success in sports. And I'm glad they cut that last part off or at least minimized it, because I was tired of people bringing me varsity athletes above a 3.5 to say, here, I think you're going to be a Rhodes Scholar. Sports is one thing that they hold up as an example of energy to use your talent to the full, but they talk about this in terms of vigorous activity in all different spheres, right? And they just like to see that what Cecil Rhodes wanted was people that were not mere bookworms. So, Nathaniel, how did you address this part of the criteria?
Yeah, I think this is really interesting because a lot of scholarships, they like people who are really kind of narrowly focused and not well-rounded, whereas Rhodes is kind of the opposite. So if you consider yourself someone who's really well-rounded, like you're in the sciences, you're an engineer, but you're also, an artist or a dancer or an opera singer, that's something that Rhodes would be interested in, right? For me, I did a minor in dance. I've been doing dance since I was 9 years old. And like in my interview, talked about wanting to do ballroom and Latin dance competitively for Oxford, which I did. And so I went to the national championships in the UK while I was here. And so like you could be very creative what it means to use your talents to the full, but it is really an idea of like they want well-rounded people because they don't want people who are just going to be on in the lab all day. They want people who are going to be really involved and active in something else, and being able to do that at a high level.
And then the remaining are just sort of a list of abstract nouns. Truth, courage, devotion to duty, sympathy for and protection of the weak, kindliness, unselfishness, fellowship, moral force of character, instincts to lead, take an interest of one's fellow being. So if you think back to that unity of purpose that we were talking about, Rhodes is looking for people that are going to fight the world's fight. They want people that are going to go out there and try to improve the conditions for others out there. So that's a really important part of the criteria. It's, those last two bullet points are a lot, but I encourage people to really focus in on them because it comes up in interview, it comes up as people review your essays to really know which of these speaks most to you. So, to contrast, the Marshall Scholarship, more recent, was founded in 1953 by the British government, and this is an actual formal thank you to the U.S. For the Marshall Plan. And so that's one important distinction. The Marshall Scholarship is only for American citizens, right? This is not open to a larger pool. Uh, it pays for everything, and you get a stipend. About the same number of awards, about the same selection rate because they have a slightly larger applicant pool. And again, just because it is directly focused on the ambassador relationship between the U.S. and the U.K., you do need to be a U.S. citizen. There's no age restriction, but you do have to apply within 2 years of completing your bachelor's degree. And so it is, again, another window there. And you can't have received a British degree before. The application component's a little different. It has a main personal statement, slightly shorter than the Rhodes, 750 words, but then 3 additional essays, one on leadership, one on your academic program, which is pretty much like the Rhodes one, and then one on your ambassadorial potential, and then only 3 letters of recommendation, of which one must be focused on leadership. They don't specify which ones are academic, but you can kind of figure that out. So Aaron, if you haven't been overwhelmed by an emergency, it has changed a little bit since you applied in terms of the distribution. But what do you remember about, looking at these different components and trying to figure out, how am I going to sort my experiences into these different boxes?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges for me in organizing the application was in figuring out, you know, what goes just firmly in the leadership, what goes into ambassadoralship potential, what goes into the academic program side, and not being duplicative.
Hmm.
Um, so I think for leadership, if I'm remembering correctly, this has been a long time, Dr. Mox, it's testing my memory. Um, I think I talked specifically about nonprofit work that I did, how I grew that particular nonprofit, and then what leadership lessons I learned in particular. And then I really tried to, though kind of a lot of my application was built around that nonprofit work that I did, um, tried to showcase other parts of my personality and things that I had done in these other essays. And I tried not to just talk about the nonprofit over and over and over again. Um, and so I think I included, I broke my spine in undergrad while horseback riding. I think that was included in there, which did get asked in the interview.
Hmm.
They will ask you about those little things that you throw in there that you think they're going to mostly overlook. But yeah, I mean, and the ambassadorial potential too. I think that there's a lot of kind of formulaic things you can say, but if you have something new, unique, like for example, wanting to do competitive dance, um, mine was I think I wanted specifically to bring my nonprofit work to the UK. I think that's kind of what I talked about. But again, tried to talk about other things. So it wasn't just the nonprofit again. But yeah, if you have something unique that you can show, like, okay, what's something you can bring to this relationship between the US and the UK that someone else couldn't? I think that's something that can help you stand out from the
Hmm.
crowd.
Yeah, so I would actually say the ambassadorial potential criterion is the most difficult one to sort of figure out, in terms of what is it I can bring and, how can I strengthen the US UK relationship long term. Um, one of the other major differences is, as you all have probably figured out, all of the Rhodes Scholars are at Oxford, and so they have more of a cohort experience. They've got that collegiate experience, and there's programming for the Rhodes Scholars at Oxford. For the Marshall Scholar, however, you can select any graduate program throughout the UK. And there's a fair bit of strategy to that as well in terms of identifying programs that are a very tight fit for what it is that you want to do. You'll be really surprised at how specific some of the titles of master's programs are in the UK. And so you could probably just start mashing in different nouns into the search engine, and you'd be surprised that there is, oh my, there is that there. But the other side of that is there isn't much of a cohort experience. So, Aaron, could you talk a little bit about what your strategy was going in as you're identifying graduate schools and locations, and then also what is the sort of networking and cohort experience been like as a Marshall Scholar?
Yeah, so I would say they like it if you have at least one of your universities being outside of the Golden Triangle. Um, uh, which honestly, Dr. Knox, I'm now blanking on what exact. I know King's College London, I think, is actually in that. I think UCL is. I think
Yeah,
there's
basically
another
the
one.
triangle between Oxford, Cambridge, and London. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So they like it if you say you want to go to a university in Bristol or something like that. Um, but that said, there were plenty of us who did put our main universities in the Golden Triangle, and that was fine. We just needed to have a compelling reason for why we wanted to go there. And thanks to the hyper specific degrees that Dr. Marks mentioned, you can usually find a pretty compelling reason in order to do that. But I wouldn't also thumb your nose at some of these other colleges. I knew some people who had really incredible experiences at them, and they are very glad that they went there. I will say that there's definitely a London cohort, right? All the people in the London schools tend to be close, and then the people in Oxford or Cambridge tend to be you're kind of close to the people that you're geographically located with. And so I'll admit there are some Rhodes Scholars from my time there that I'm closer with than other Marshalls in my class. So I think it's worthwhile to have at least 1 year kind of in the Golden Triangle just so you can benefit from having more people around. But that said, I had plenty of friends who did not intersect with the Golden Triangle, and we were able to come together for different events. The Marshall will put on events both inside London and then outside, kind of throughout the country, so we can explore different parts of the country, and so there are opportunities to get to know people. But yeah, it's definitely something to think about and strategize for your particular situation.
Yeah, the Marshall Commission points out that the percentage of Marshall scholars who marry a Brit is higher for those that attend university outside of the Golden Triangle. So that's not a promise or a threat. It's just an observation, right? They're more likely to be fully integrated into British culture. I'm going to touch briefly on the last couple of awards because I do want to save some time for Q&A. If you're interested in Cambridge University, in your searching through all of this, then you should also double up and apply for the Gates Cambridge Scholarship. The major difference with this one is that you don't need to be nominated by the university, and the application for it is actually embedded in the admissions application. For Marshall and Rhodes, you don't need to worry about applying for admission. You should separately. I think it's a good idea, but it's not required for the fellowship application itself. Whereas the Gates, it's actually embedded within that application. So it's very similar in terms of its focus. It's looking for people that are going to leverage, their abilities and their knowledge and their experiences to making the world a better place. This is funded by the Gates Foundation, right? Which is, if you know anything about their mission, deadline slightly later than the Rhodes and Marshall process, but again, you don't have to be nominated for this. And again, it's fairly minimal. You have your Cambridge application, which would be very specialized to the program to which you're applying, and then provide an extra 500-word statement that speaks to the Gates criteria. You only need 2 letters of recommendation for admission to Cambridge, but Gates would require a third one that talks about character. Criteria, again, very similar. And you can see why it's quite easy for applicants to double and triple up on these because they're all kind of looking for generally the same type of people with some slight variations. And as well, if you're a STEM major and you're looking at Cambridge, then you should also apply for the Churchill Scholarship. This is tenable only at Cambridge, and it's only for one-year master's degrees in STEM. If you're wondering, what am I going to do with a one-year master's degree? The majority of master's degrees in the UK are 1 year. Their academic calendar and their system slightly different than ours. So just know that. Unlike Gates Cambridge, you do need to be nominated, though. We can only nominate 2 students per year. It is so narrow, though, that it generally hasn't become a huge issue. As you saw, the selection rate for Churchill was slightly better. But yeah, so composition very similar to the others. We see students applying for multiple awards across the board, right? They have probably the broadest selection criteria I've seen, outstanding personal qualities, and they refuse to define what that means. But I would also throw in here, if you are considering graduate study abroad, you should also be looking at Fulbright. One in the UK, because 40 of their awards let me get to that next page. 40 of the awards to the UK are specifically for graduate study, so they are affixed to a specific university. So if you're looking outside of the triangle and like, yeah, absolutely, I want to go to St. Andrews, and like, boom, okay, there's a Fulbright award. So that way you can increase your odds of getting a fully funded graduate degree in the UK that way. Many of our students who apply for Rhodes Marshall also sort of hedge their bets and apply to another country. And so we had a Rhodes finalist a couple of years ago who had also applied for a graduate degree in Norway. And so she didn't get the Rhodes. She interviewed, but she did get the Fulbright and ended up getting a graduate degree in Norway. So if you're interested in Fulbright, we have a big information session coming up this coming Wednesday, Fulbright Day. I encourage you to RSVP for that, and we've got an alumni panel discussion for that as well. So it's on a very similar timeline, and again, it does make good sense for people who are applying for these awards to also be looking at Fulbright. So dates to keep in mind. April 15 is our intent to apply deadline. There's a very simple form that you'll need to fill out, just officially declaring your intentions to apply for one of these awards. We just need to know how many people are coming for dinner. I will then put you into a multi-week sort of program to give you some guidance along the way and give you activities to help you write all the stuff you need to write. Our campus deadline is August 15th. So as you can see, the bulk of the work is going to be done over the summer. And we understand that you all are very busy over the summer in most cases. And if you're not, then maybe you're not a great applicant for Marshall or Rhodes. But you ought to be busy over the summer doing something amazing. And so we structure a kind of low touch program to help you do all that work. The national deadlines are in late September, early October. And then within a couple of weeks, you find out if you've been invited for interview. Similar timeline for Fulbright, as I mentioned, March 26th. So get out there and do some homework. Eliminate options. It's a stretch, because the odds are tough enough even for people that are luck fits. Really note which have nominations, which don't. And then in parting advice I'll give you before I open it up for questions. Strong letters of recommendation are essential, so you should start thinking about that now. But the last point on this list, we need to know that the things that matter to you are also a public concern. They ultimately don't care about what your reasons are for applying for these things. They don't care that you've always wanted to go here. They don't care that you've always been passionate about whatever. What they would like to know is how your career is actually going to produce something of value for other people. And I think if you stick to that, you'll find this goes much better. In terms of, how do we get started? Your first step, and the QR code here links directly to the application instructions that are on our website, ONSA, under the Apply tab. You send me your resume and transcripts. So do that first before we schedule appointments. Then I'll invite you to schedule an appointment. And again, I just really want to save you time if this is not a great fit for you. If it does look like, okay, we've got enough stuff to work with here, then we'll move forward. And then you'll have between now and April 15 to fill out that form. It's pretty low stakes. So, all right, let me pause there. In our last couple of minutes, see if we had any questions from participants. You're welcome to pop them in the chat, raise a hand, unmute yourself, whatever you're most comfortable with.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm in a clean room, so I'm wearing a mask, so just let me know if you need me to speak a little louder. Um, how does, because I'm going to be doing my plus 1 year for my master's degree at ASU, how does that interact with the Marshall and Rhodes scholarships? Would I apply this cycle or wait till after I'm finished with the 4+1?
Yeah, so you'd need to be not attending ASU to start another program somewhere else. So if this is presently your senior year and you're about to do a +1 starting fall 26, then you would wait to apply, right? So you can't be concurrently enrolled in both places.
Thank you.
Mhm. So Elena asks, even if I choose not to apply for any of these, may I still reach out to me for help with others? Absolutely, yeah. There are, one of the things I would encourage everyone to do is to take a look at our scholarship database, look at our events, subscribe to our bulletin. There are literally hundreds of different awards. And these are just really 4 or 5 awards that we work with. So if this process in general attracts you, then by all means, you should take a look at some other ones. One of the questions I was just typing a response to was, how can we get access to the intent to apply? I'm still getting the Canvas up and running for that. And so once you've had your intake meeting with me, I'll add you to that Canvas, and that has the link to the intent to apply. So Mark asks, I see that the ages for the Rhodes Scholarship is 24 when applying. I'm going to be 25 next week, so you won't be eligible. And some of these things are just not negotiable, right? And so if they say the age is 24 at the time of application and you're older than 24, then that's a no. So, any questions for our guests?
While we wait for questions, I will say on the note of the website is definitely look out for these other scholarships too. I think there was a couple times where Dr. Mock said I was the first person who applied from
Yeah.
ASU for some of these. So like just go for it. There's a lot of other scholarships. I've applied for many of these. I've lost more scholarships than most people will ever dream of applying. So go for it. It
Yeah.
really does. It is casting a wide net really can pay off.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not going to spill the tea, but we are waiting. I am, I don't know about we, but I am waiting on Nathaniel's decision to see which of 2 awards he's going to choose from, either of which would be the first time an ASU student has won the award. So either one's fine with me. So maybe to close this out, I'd love to hear from both Nathaniel and Aaron in terms of what is it you wish you had known at the start of the application process, and then kind of looking back a little distance, what's been the most valuable part of the experience in the UK for you? Excuse me.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to go first. Um, let's see, at the beginning of the application process, honestly, I think wish I had known to look at some of those, we'll say further flung universities, right? I really looked mostly at I think Dr. Mox tried to encourage me to do that, but I think I still, stubborn, looked more at the Triangle, and I do wish that I had looked a little bit more further flung. And then this is just sort of more generally, right? Like I wish that I had realized that I had a shot, right? I think that I applied, obviously, I wanted to win, but I think part of me didn't really believe it would happen. And so I actually had a very interesting, like, emotional response when I got it. I was like, this can't be real. This like cannot possibly be happening. So anyways, it was not exactly what I expected. Um, and sorry, Dr. Box, what was the second part of the question?
Oh, just reflection for you at least. You've got a little more distance than Nathaniel, but on what the general benefit has been of having studied in the UK as opposed to just maybe going onto a master's program in the US.
Oh, the network that I have from my time there is incredible. I got my job at the National Security Council because of people that I knew from the Marshall, both Brits and Americans. So make friends with the people that you meet there, Americans, Brits, other nationalities, because that network is really going to be the thing that years down the line you will find just how useful it is. Plus, I mean, I met my husband through that network, right? Like, he was not British, but but I still am benefiting very acutely from my time there, even now, years and years later. So can't underestimate those connections that you make.
Yeah, to kind of also touch on one of the questions about how many I really couldn't tell you. I have like a whole spreadsheet, so if I wanted to, I could find the actual number just to give you context. I think just this cycle alone, I applied to five, large scale like national scholarships or fellowships. And that was in addition to a good deal of law schools as well. So I spent a lot of time writing and developing my thoughts about what I want to do. And it's been, once you kind of get that skill and you build that up, you can do it a lot quicker than maybe at the start. I will say this kind of is part of my thing I wish I knew was that you're going to have a lot of setbacks. Like I'm sure Erin could say the same, is that she's not gotten every job she's applied for or every scholarship she's applied for or even close to that. But look at her now. Look at all the things that she's accomplished. And, I get to say that I'm a Rhodes Scholar, but I also get to say I'm a finalist or a reject from so many other scholarships as well. And so you only need one to say yes to really kind of get all the benefits of this process. On the tail end, but you don't have to get accepted to any of them to get the benefits of the process. And so I know for me, I was a finalist for the Truman Scholarship, thought it was going to be something that I was really, set for, and I didn't end up getting it. And I was really crushed. I thought about not even applying for the Rhodes or the Marshall or anything that following year because I thought, if I can't get Truman, why would I be competitive for Rhodes? And so I think just knowing that earlier on that it's really at the end of the day, there's a lot of luck involved, even if you are a qualified applicant. And it was funny. Someone else who was a finalist for Truman ended up being in my Rhodes cohort at the same year, a few months later, and we both got rejected from Truman. So clearly, we're both qualified for something, and we shouldn't have allowed that earlier rejection to paint our kind of picture of everything else. But that's something I would encourage you all to reflect on is starting early. I started applying for these scholarships my sophomore year, I believe, is my first time applying for a national scholarship for the Udall. And being able to build that skill is what allowed me to, be able to now not have to rely so much on ONSA to be able to still be competitive for these big awards. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah. Well, thank you both very much. And if you all didn't see in the chat, I had several questions about, can I schedule other appointments for other things? I'm not really sure where to start, or I'm just a first or second year student. Visit our website, onsa.asu.edu. You can look through our database. You can get on the weekly bulletin. You can also just schedule general advising appointments. And so if you're just a first or second year student, great. Go there, schedule a general appointment. We'll help you get started. If you're not sure in general, like what you want to do, we have other topics that you can schedule as well. But if you are interested in applying for Marshall or Rhodes in particular, again, first step is to email me, your resume and transcripts, and we have our full application instructions on the website. So, well, wonderful. I want to be respectful of our guests' time as they are solving the world's problems. And so thank you all very much for being present, and thank you all for joining us today.
Thanks, Dr. Marks.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Dr. Marks. I'll be seeing you soon, hopefully.
Excellent.